Hello and welcome to our daily work remote strategies. Our guest today is Brian Branagan, and we're going to give everybody about 30 seconds to a minute to hop onto this call. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I'll be introducing you again in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So we're just letting people join in. Hello, today is about breathing with Brian Branagan, and the subtitle is Coherence in a Crazy World. We'll be starting in about 30 seconds. Just giving you a heads up, we'll be starting soon. Okay, and now we are live everywhere. We are almost ready to start. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our call. Brian, do you mind if I give people a short stretch before I do the formal introduction?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So a very short stretch, because you've likely been sitting at your desk, we've been sitting at our desks. So would you please just, if you want to, but we highly recommend it, just scrunch your shoulders up and roll them back and down and forward now. And one more time, really high up, super uncomfortable, really, really high up, and then back and down, and let's end down. And then let's shake out one arm and then shake out the other arm. And then let's do, because we've probably been typing already for part of the day, this kind of just stretching your, let me get in this shot, your arm back. So hello, I know you're joining us, and I'm just doing a pre-mini webinar stretch to make sure. Doesn't that feel good? Doesn't that wrist stretch feel good? So I'm trying to get this in the shot so you can see it. I'm really just bringing my hand back and breathing as I'm doing that. You'll be doing more with Brian. Thank you. Thank you for giving us a little. Today is very participatory. And what that means is, as Brian does things, he'll also ask you, how did that work for you? So feel free to give me those comments in the chat, and I will be reading those out. We're delighted to welcome you. Hello, and today's episode of Daily Work Remote Strategies is with Brian Branagan, who's been a coach with us almost since the beginning. And today is on breathing, and specifically coherence in a crazy world. Hello, Brian, and turning it over to you.
Okay. Hello, Sanya. So good to be with you and with everyone on the call. So I was so excited when you started this work remote strategies. One of the things that I've been doing as a coach and with Silicon Valley Change is I work with a lot of managers over the years who have geographically dispersed teams. And one of the big challenges that they've always have is just how do they create that sense of social cohesion and solidarity, with people that are in, team members that are in Costa Rica, Romania, India. And one of the things that I've actually encouraged them to do is to breathe together. I know that sounds a little odd, but it's what a lot of us do when we're in in-person meetings together. We do it unconsciously, but we are always kind of watching each other for how what the mood is of people in the room, and how they are physically, and we can't help. In that way, we have this, in our brains, we have these things called mirror neurons, where we kind of match how other people are. So I spent a lot of time kind of looking at how do you do that. And I came across the work of Suzanne Zeman, who's a master somatic coach. And she wrote a book that was really foundational for me. And it's called Listening to Bodies. So I was so taken with it that I asked her to coach me in how to do that. And I've been sharing some of the techniques that I'll be sharing with you today about how to do that. Now, the one thing that was really eye-opening for me was that the role of breath, how we breathe. So she talks about in her book the 3 different kinds of breathing. There's shallow breathing, which is kind of up in the chest. There's a middle breathing, which is kind of in our chest area, and what she calls dropped breathing. So each kind of breathing produces a different kind of mood and actually a different mindset. So I want to try experimenting with this so that you all can get an experience of the 3 different kinds of breathing. And so let's start with the first one, which is kind of shallow breathing or high breathing. So high breathing is, and I bet this is what we find ourselves doing a lot. We're hunched over our laptops or computers. We're zooming in on that little box that to kind of see what's going on of the person who's speaking. Well, so what I'd invite you to do is now just kind of lean forward and look at the screen and take as deep a breath as you can. Now, what I find I'm doing is that my breath is really high in my chest, and I don't really feel like I get a lot of oxygen. So to get the kind of oxygen I need to be able to concentrate is I have to breathe more quickly as I'm breathing shallowly. So try that. Now, what neuroscientists have discovered is that kind of people who are anxious, just are in a, have come from an upsetting situation that is disturbing to them, have high shallow breathing, and you can kind of hyperventilate and get a panic attack. Well, they've also found that you can produce a panic attack or anxiety by repeatedly doing low, shallow breathing. So what was this experience like for you when you were doing low or high, shallow breathing? And you want to read off any comments that you get, Senya?
People have not entered in their comments yet. It usually takes them a moment. So I'm happy to check.
Well, or if you don't want to share your experience with that, but do you find what's your posture like when you're on Zoom call after Zoom call during the day?
I'll just start as people are so hunched over, just like you said.
Yeah.
And also what you said resonated, that sometimes the breath just doesn't get very low, because I know I can breathe deeply and the lungs can open up. So I would just add, yeah, it feels more intense and tight.
Yeah. So the thing is that once you notice that you're leaned over, your chest capacity is constrained because you're bent over. You can actually do an intervention. You can kind of sit back in your chair, and sitting back in your chair then makes your middle section available to you. So you can get more air, more oxygen. So I'd invite you now just to consider leaning back and breathing a little more deeply. Just see how much oxygen you can take in. So the first thing I notice is that I can, when I'm sitting back, is that I can actually take more breath, more air. And because I can take more air in, more oxygen, I don't have to breathe as often. So it's kind of a lower, slower breath. Now, and the other advantage of it is that kind of sitting back in your chair, head up, I'm more open to others or to the world around me. Now, it's a little hard when you're in a Zoom meeting because, again, your focus is constrained, but you can still generate a feeling of openness with that kind of middle breathing where you feel like your diaphragm is coming down and you're able to take in more oxygen. Okay, so the next breathing style is what I call dropped breathing, and it requires you to. Oh, actually, Senya, what were I'd like to know what were people's experiences of the dropped breathing or of the middle breathing.
Of the shallow breathing, but with the leaning back in the chair.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
people said it feels good to take deeper breaths. People said I feel lazier, but it feels good.
Yeah.
And someone else is just writing it feels more complete and satisfying to be in that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say just to the person who felt that they were being lazier, it's you still have permission to get all the breath you need. And with all the breath you need, you can be more productive. So all of that's available to you. So you can choose when you find yourself leaning in and being anxious to lean back.
People had a more calming effect on them.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And one of the things about that is that anxiety triggers neurochemicals called a neurochemical called cortisol, which is a stress hormone in the brain. When you're anxious, you're stressed, and the brain secretes a stress hormone called cortisol. Now, here's the thing that most people don't realize, it's kind of a shock to me, is that when your brain is flooded with cortisol, you actually lose access to the prefrontal cortex, the part that you do analytical thinking. So if your job requires you to do analytical thinking, then you have to do things that prevent the unknowing production of cortisol, because then you're just not thinking. You're not able to think. And that's why calming is a great word, because it's not relaxed, it's attentive. So you're alert, you feel supported because you have more breath, your cortisol hormone production in your brain is reduced, and you have access to your frontal lobe. So the third type of breathing is what I call dropped breathing. And again, I thank you, Senya, for introducing the stretching exercise at the beginning, because it really does require you to kind of not only sit back in your chair, but roll your shoulders back and breathe from your belly. And imagine breath is coming in from the bottom of your belly and then filling up to the top of your lungs. So I'm going to ask everyone to try to breathe a little more slowly and deeply than you normally would. And you may find yourself kind of at a point where you realize, oh my gosh, I have even more breath available for me. So let's take a deep breath in, and let's try it on a count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release on a count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I know when I did it, I could kind of feel my ribs in my chest expanding a little bit, as though it were a barrel, and I could and it was moving out, and I could feel the ribs in the back moving out as well. So how did people experience dropped breathing, Senya?
How do you experience drop breathing? Let us know. In the
Yeah.
meantime, I'll be Brian's guinea pig. I experienced it as wider. And it gives me a visual with the ribs once you mentioned it, but only once you mentioned it. And then I tried it again. I've always been surprised by the fact that ribs are bones, but they're the kind of bones that can move. That's always been shocking to me. That it doesn't even make sense. But as you said that, I tried to feel that as well.
Yeah, cartilage is a wonderful thing. You know, it allows for expansion. So this kind of deep or dropped breathing, I recommend for whenever you find yourself in, having incoherent thoughts. Things seem crazy. You're trying to track what's going on. All of those are anxiety-producing thoughts, which then the body responds to by doing low, shallow breathing or high, shallow breathing. And then you get caught in this vicious cycle of anxious thoughts, shallow breathing, producing more anxious thoughts, producing more shallow breathing. So, yes, go ahead.
We've had a few comments about the drop breathing, the deep breathing, that it's relaxing and it feels like you release stress and tension.
Yeah.
And the other comment is it feels like filling up a barrel.
Yeah. Now, I just want to share one little anecdote where I was in a business meeting. At the time, I was the director of test engineering for a company that had a project with a critical deadline. I brought up an issue that was pretty critical. In this meeting, it was a very heated conversation. A lot of people talking over each other. And I found myself leaning in, waiting for my opportunity to jump in with my brilliant thought that would have everyone stunned and amazed to be able to, make my point and then believe what I, take action. But because I had been practicing this kind of breathing, deep, dropped breathing and my body liked getting all that oxygen, it recognized that what I was doing, and I decided to take sit back and take drop my breathing. In other words, I was taking a breather. And in that moment where I decided to step back and take a breath, the person chairing the meeting turned to me and said, "Brian, it looks like you have something to say." And the thing was, at that point, the brilliant thought I had 15 seconds prior didn't seem relevant. And I just said, things are getting a little heated right now. Let's all take a breather. And we stopped the meeting, took a break, and we were able to come back. So one of the things that I recommend then is this kind of slow dropped breathing is available to you anytime. It only takes 30 seconds to a minute. and it can have a profound impact on the rest of the meeting. I encourage people to remember to breathe. And the thing about creating coherence in a crazy world is that the next thing I wanted to share with people is that, actually, were there any other comments before I go on to the next point?
We have for the Q&A section that will start once you're completed. We already have 4 questions lined up.
Okay, good. Yeah. So the last thing I just want to share is something called HeartMath, and please drop this into the chat line. It's another approach to breathing. And there's a science behind this. And this is a free course that the HeartMath Institute is making available to everyone during this pandemic, because they see it's so important. And what it shows is the relationship between regular, rhythmic, deep breathing, and how it can affect your heart rate, and how heart rate affects your brainwave patterns. Now, a lot of people think that their brain is the gray tissue between their ears. But a lot of new research that's being done is discovering that there is many neuropeptides and connections in the heart and in the gut as there are in the brain. And some research is even showing that the brain tells the heart, the heart tells the brain, what's going on. Like microseconds signals, happen from the heart to the brain. So do we have time to do a quick breathing exercise?
You're in charge, whatever you
Okay.
like. So we can do the breathing exercise and then go into Q&A.
So this is just something that I really recommend to people, and it's called the quick coherence technique from HeartMath. And I'm just going to lead people through it. And what we're going to do is, so I just ask you to kind of sit back in your chair, shoulders back, arms relaxed, and bring your attention and awareness to the area of your heart, the center of your chest. And imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little more slowly and deeply than usual. Find an easy rhythm that's comfortable for you to maintain. Now, bring to mind a positive experience you've had in your life. Perhaps it's an experience of a time you felt love or appreciation for someone, a pet, a moment in nature, or an accomplishment. And just breathe in an attitude of love or gratitude. And let that experience radiate throughout your body, as if you're experiencing that moment in the exact same way you did the first time you experienced it. And continue your low, slow breathing. And bring your attention back to the area of your heart. And open your eyes. And how is, just curious, how is life different for you now? Having taken that 1 minute to do the quick coherence technique.
One person wrote, "It felt like giving my heart a hug."
Oh, that's so pretty. So good, yes.
I'll say for me, I was surprised how good it felt in such a short time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one reason I like the HeartMath techniques is that, it's based in science. And, for me, I've tried lots of different times to meditate. I still, it takes me a long time to get the thoughts in my brain to slow down enough. But by bringing my attention to my heart, breathing a little more deeply than I normally would, recalling a positive feeling, I can get the effect of a 20-minute meditation session in under a minute. And here's the other thing. Nobody knows you're doing it. You don't have to say, oh, I'm really anxious right now. I can't wait to get back on the cushion to meditate. It's just like, okay, sit back in your chair, and so that's how we can all take a breather when we find ourselves a little more crazy in these kind of crazy times, and bring a little coherence to our lives.
Coherence breathing. Could we go into the questions?
Yes, absolutely.
The questions are exactly to what you've just said about meditation. So a bunch of questions. How long do the effects of deep breathing last?
For one thing, the quick coherence technique I see as an interrupter. It's kind of a catch yourself feeling crazy, taking a moment to bring coherence, getting your heart and your brain kind of aligned, and kind of holding on to that sense of peace and ease that you felt when you recalled that positive experience. So I really think it's I know that in many of the other work remote strategies calls, people have talked about gratitude lists. Well, keep a list of those handy.
And so you can combine it. You can do that gratitude list combined with it.
Yeah, and so instead
so
of
how
like,
would you say it lasts, Brian? People are asking.
Yeah, so from the one experience I relayed, when things were crazy, and I took a deep breath, and I was recognized by the chair of the meeting to, it was easily a half hour, but it was enough to kind of get a new setting
and transition.
And transition. It's coming back, recentering, and then I can make a new choice for next action. So I think the next thing is really, it lasts as long as the choice you make for what you want to do next.
I see. So it's the breathing and the actions you do after the breathing.
Yeah. So
okay.
Go ahead.
We've got 3 questions, but about a couple of minutes.
I've got time.
Okay. Do you recommend a certain number of deep breaths, or just until you feel better?
I would say, you can do it with lots. What I actually recommend is that you do it several times a day, for at least a minute or 2, so that so it's the frequency of doing the exercise, the quick coherent breathing, is more important than the number of breaths within one session. So I'd say a minute or 2, but often.
That leads directly into somebody else's question. How do you learn to do deep breathing unconsciously most of the time?
Again, I think it's practicing where you give the body the experience of having all the breath it needs, and the body will remember that it wants full breath. That's what happened to me in that meeting.
So kind of the frequency of giving it to yourself as a practice or as a
Yeah,
habit, so you can call on it
yeah,
instinctively if needed.
yeah, yeah.
Very cool.
Like it wasn't as if I noticed my body hunched over, ready to jump in. It was like, oh, this doesn't feel comfortable. I know what feels comfortable sitting back. So that's the important thing, that it's training your body that you will allow it all the breath it needs.
This is our last question that's been typed in here. How do you combine breathing with meditation?
Well, I mean, a lot of the meditation techniques are basic breathing techniques. I just find the quick coherent breathing as a way to quickly kind of catch and shift in the moment. But I still also meditate in the morning. And this is a great technique for people that say they can't meditate, or they have problems with it. And I just tell them, well, like if you can sit in a chair and you can breathe, you're meditating. So this is just, again, the thing that you can do anytime in the day. And actually, nobody knows you're doing it.
Yeah.
And the one last thing I'll just say is that once you observe your own breath, you can, even in Zoom, see how someone else is breathing, and at least know how much room to give them, how to kind of navigate in the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what Suzanne covers in her book, Listening to Bodies, Listening to Bodies.
Thank you so much. So what we've done today with you are shallow breathing, middle breathing, and dropped breathing. And then you've given us this coherence technique, which is also in the free course at HeartMath that you've given us the link to.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. That people are writing in the comments. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian. We're delighted too. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and see you again on Monday for our 20-minute daily work remote strategies. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much. All the best.